The cruelest sound in the world is not a door slamming shut. It is your own key failing to turn in a lock that was supposed to be home. Claire Bennett stood on the front porch at 11:47 p.m. Rain sliding off the ends of her hair. Her suitcase tilted beside her like it had given up before she had. The little white house on Maple Ridge Lane looked exactly the same from the outside. Same narrow steps. Same porch light with the yellow glow. Same clay pot where her mother used to plant basil every spring. But the lock was different. Silver. New. Cold. Claire tried the old brass key again. The one her mother had carried for 27 years. The one worn smooth at the edges from a life of groceries, late shifts, Sunday church, and quiet survival. It went halfway in, then stopped. She pulled it out, wiped the rain from her fingers, and tried again. Nothing. For one breath, she just stared at the door. Maybe she was exhausted. Maybe grief had finally made ordinary things impossible. She had flown back from Arizona only 2 hours earlier, after scattering her mother's ashes in the desert garden her mom had always dreamed of seeing. In her arms, Claire still held a small cardboard memory box tied with twine. Inside were old photographs, a faded recipe card, a pressed white rose, and the brass key that suddenly meant nothing. Then a light turned on inside the house. Claire froze. Footsteps moved behind the curtain. Slow. Comfortable. Like whoever was inside belonged there. The door opened 3 inches, still caught by the chain, and Ryan Whitmore looked out at her with dry hair, a clean shirt, and the calm face of a man who had practiced this moment in the mirror. "You are back early," he said. Claire blinked through the rain. "Ryan, what did you do to my lock?" His eyes dropped to the key in her hand, and a small smile touched his mouth. Not warm. Not guilty. Just satisfied. "I changed it." The words landed harder than the weather. Claire stepped closer, her shoes squeaking on the wet porch boards. "This is my house." Ryan opened the door a little wider, just enough for her to see past his shoulder. The hallway lamp was on. Her mother's blue quilt was folded over the armchair. A stack of Claire's mail sat on the table opened, and beside it, face down, was the framed photograph of her mother standing in the front yard under the white rose trellis. Something inside Claire tightened. "Let me in," she said, quieter now. Ryan sighed as if she were being unreasonable. "You should find somewhere else tonight." "Somewhere else?" Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. "My mother was buried 3 days ago, and you changed the locks while I was gone? Claire, do not make this dramatic." He lifted a folder into view, thick with papers she did not recognize. "Things changed while you were busy saying goodbye." She stared at the folder, then at him. The man she had almost married. The man who once fixed a loose cabinet hinge and told her he wanted to build a life here. The man her mother never fully trusted, though she had been too kind to say it plainly. "What papers are those?" Claire asked. Ryan's smile disappeared. "Proof that I have a right to stay." The rain tapped harder against the porch roof. Across the street, a curtain shifted. A neighbor was watching. Claire felt the humiliation rise hot under her wet skin. But she would not give him tears. Not on her porch. Not in front of the door where her mother used to kiss her forehead before school. She raised the brass key between them. "This house has been in my family since I was 9 years old." Ryan looked at the key and almost laughed. "Then it is a shame that key does not open it anymore." For a second, the whole world narrowed to that silver lock, his hand on the door, and the upside-down picture of her mother inside. Claire thought of the last thing her mom had whispered in the hospital, breath thin but eyes clear. "Do not let anyone make you feel homeless in a place love built." Claire swallowed. Her fingers closed around the old brass key until its teeth pressed into her palm. "You can change every lock in this house," she said, voice low, shaking only at the edges. "But that does not make it yours." Ryan leaned closer to the gap in the door. "We will see." Then he shut it. The new lock clicked once. Clean. Final. Claire stood in the rain with her suitcase, her mother's memory box, and a key that no longer opened the door. But she did not leave right away. She looked at the windows, at the porch, at the white rosebush bent under the storm, and somewhere beneath the grief, beneath the shock, something sharp and steady woke up. Ryan thought he had locked her out of her home. He had no idea he had just opened the one fight Claire Bennett was finally ready to win. Claire did call the police, But by the time the cruiser rolled up to the curb, the rain had softened into a cold mist and Claire had begun to understand something terrifying. Being right did not always mean being believed quickly. The two officers stood on the porch while Ryan opened the door with that same careful calm, holding his folder like a shield. He did not raise his voice. He did not look nervous. That made everything worse. "She moved out voluntarily," Ryan said, handing over the papers. "We were engaged. We shared expenses. I have been maintaining the property. She left for several days without notice, and I had concerns about security." Claire stared at him. "I left to bury my mother." One officer glanced at her, sympathy flickering across his face, but sympathy was not a key. Ryan opened the folder wider. There were utility bills with his name added, copies of repair receipts, and a document Claire recognized only vaguely, a cohabitation agreement he had once asked her to sign after dinner, saying it was just to prove residency for a temporary insurance matter. She remembered being tired. She remembered her mother coughing in the next room. She remembered Ryan placing the pen gently in her hand and saying, "Trust me, Claire." Now that signature sat in front of strangers like a trap she had walked into with her eyes closed. "This looks like a civil property dispute," the officer said carefully. "We cannot force entry tonight unless there is a clear court order." "But it is my home," Claire whispered. "My mother left it to me." Ryan gave a soft, disappointed sigh, the kind meant for an audience. "Claire is grieving. I understand that. But grief does not change legal documents." Across the street, Mrs. Ellison's curtains moved again. A porch light clicked on 2 houses down. Claire felt the neighborhood watching her become a question mark in front of her own door. The officer lowered his voice. "Do you have somewhere safe to go tonight?" For a moment Claire almost laughed. Safe. The word felt far away, like something from another language. Her safe place was behind the door Ryan had just closed. Her safe place smelled like lavender laundry soap, and her mother's chicken soup and old hardwood warmed by summer sun. Claire tightened her grip on the memory box. "I can go to a motel." She could not really. Her debit card had less than $80 left after the flight, the rental car, and the cremation fees. But pride was the last dry thing she owned. Ryan stepped back inside. Before closing the door, he looked directly at her suitcase. "I will put the rest of your things in storage when I have time." The click came again. Smaller this time. Crueler. Claire stood there until the officers drove away, red taillights fading through the wet street. Then she dragged her suitcase down the porch steps, each wheel bumping hard against the concrete. At the end of the driveway she turned back. Through the front window she saw Ryan lift her mother's photograph from the table, look at it for half a second, and set it inside a drawer. That was the moment her sadness changed shape. Not into anger that burned wild, but into something colder, cleaner, steadier. At midnight, Claire sat in a 24-hour diner 3 miles away, wrapped in a vinyl booth beneath buzzing fluorescent lights. Her suitcase leaned against her knee. Her mother's box sat on the table beside a cup of coffee she could barely afford. She opened the lid, needing proof that her life had existed before tonight. There were photographs, birthday cards, a church bulletin from Easter, the pressed white rose wrapped in wax paper, and beneath it all the brass key. Claire picked it up again. In the diner light, she noticed something she had never seen before. Tiny letters were scratched along the side, almost hidden by years of use. R.B. 214. Claire frowned. Her mother's name had been Margaret Rose Bennett. Those initials made sense. The numbers did not. She rubbed her thumb over them, hearing her mother's last whisper again. "Do not let anyone make you feel homeless in a place love built." Claire looked out at the empty parking lot, at the rain shining under the street lamps, at her reflection in the glass. Wet hair, red eyes, second-hand coat, a woman locked out, but not finished. By morning she would find out what those numbers meant. By morning Ryan's papers would no longer be the only story anyone heard. By 6:15 the next morning, Claire Bennett was standing outside the downtown records office with damp hair, tired eyes, and the brass key wrapped in her fist like a small piece of courage. She had slept for 40 minutes in the diner booth before the waitress, a woman named Denise with silver hoop earrings and kind eyes, quietly refilled her coffee and said, Honey, whatever you are fighting, make sure you fight it with paper. Those words stayed with Claire as she crossed the city in the gray morning light, dragging her suitcase behind her over cracked sidewalks and puddles left from the storm. The county building smelled like old carpet, printer ink, and government coffee. People moved through the lobby with folders tucked under their arms, each person carrying some private emergency. Claire took a number, sat under a flickering screen, and opened her mother's memory box on her lap. The key lay on top of the pressed white rose. R. B. 214. She searched the county property database on a public computer, fingers shaking as she typed the address on Maple Ridge Lane. Her mother's name appeared. Margaret Rose Bennett. Then a second line appeared beneath it, one Claire did not understand. Transfer to Bennett Family Trust, filed 8 years earlier. Claire leaned closer. Trust. Her mother had never mentioned a trust. Not once. Before she could click deeper, a message blocked the screen. Document images unavailable without certified access. Claire walked to the clerk's counter and tried to explain, but the woman behind the glass only shook her head. You need identification, proof of relationship, and the trust reference number. I have my identification, Claire said. I have my mother's death certificate on my phone. I just need to know what 214 means. The clerk glanced at the key, then softened slightly. That is not a county reference. Could be a box number. Could be a bank. Could be private storage. Claire stepped away from the counter, hope and frustration twisting together inside her chest. A box number. Her mother had cleaned offices for half the businesses in town after Claire's father left. Banks. Law firms. Real estate offices. Too many places. Too little time. Then her phone buzzed. A neighborhood alert. Her breath stopped when she saw the post. Public meeting tonight regarding Maple Ridge redevelopment proposal. Hosted by Caldwell Holdings. Claire knew that name. Everyone on Maple Ridge knew it. Caldwell Holdings was the company buying older neighborhoods, tearing down small homes, and replacing them with luxury townhomes that started at $800,000. People said the company's CEO was young, brilliant, and ruthless. Ethan Caldwell. Claire stared at the notice. Ryan had said things changed while she was gone. What if this was why? What if he had not just locked her out? What if he was trying to sell her mother's house before she could prove it was hers? By 9 o'clock, Claire was walking into the marble lobby of Caldwell Tower with her suitcase bumping behind her and the memory box pressed to her ribs. Security looked at her coat, her wet shoes, her tired face, and moved to stop her. Ma'am, do you have an appointment? No, Claire said, voice thin but firm. But someone in this building is trying to buy my house from a man who does not own it. The guard hesitated. Behind him, elevator doors opened. A tall man stepped out, dressed in a dark navy suit, his hair neatly combed, his expression sharp enough to cut through noise. People in the lobby subtly shifted around him. Assistants straightened. A receptionist sat taller. Claire did not know his face, not yet. She only saw another polished executive in a building full of people who could afford to ignore her. So she stepped directly into his path and pushed the folder from the county office toward him. Please, she said. If your legal department is part of the Maple Ridge deal, you need to read this before you destroy what is left of my family. The man stopped. His eyes moved from the folder to the brass key in her hand, then to the suitcase at her feet. He did not look annoyed. That surprised her. Who are you? He asked. Claire Bennett. His expression changed just slightly, almost too fast to catch. Maple Ridge Lane? Claire's stomach dropped. So you do know. He took the folder, opened it, and scanned the page with unsettling speed. I know the acquisition file. I do not know this. Ryan Whitmore changed my locks last night, Claire said. He told the police he had rights to the house. Now your company is hosting a meeting about buying the neighborhood. If he sells you my home, he is selling you a lie. The lobby felt suddenly quiet. The man closed the folder. Do you have proof the house belongs only to you? Claire lifted the brass key. I think my mother left me proof. I just do not know where it is yet. For the first time, something human moved behind his controlled eyes. Not pity. Recognition. As if he understood the difference between losing property and losing home. I am Ethan Caldwell, he said. Claire went still. The name hit like cold water. This was not a legal assistant. This was the man whose company might take everything Ryan had not already touched. Ethan handed the folder back carefully. Miss Bennett, I was on my way to a board meeting worth more money than this entire block. Claire's jaw tightened, bracing for dismissal. But he looked at the key again and said, "It can wait." Ethan Caldwell did not take Claire to a conference room first. He took her across the street to a small diner tucked between a dry cleaner and a pharmacy, the kind of place with cracked red booths, bottomless coffee, and waitresses who called everyone sweetheart whether they meant it or not. Claire sat across from him with her suitcase beside her, feeling painfully aware of the distance between his tailored suit and her rain-wrinkled coat. He ordered black coffee. She ordered toast because it was the cheapest thing on the menu, and because her stomach had been empty since the airport. Ethan noticed but said nothing. That made her trust him a fraction more. Men like Ryan made kindness sound generous so they could collect payment later. Ethan's silence felt different. Measured. Careful. He opened her folder, then placed his phone beside it and called someone named Marissa from legal. "I need the Maple Ridge acquisition file paused," he said. Claire looked up sharply. Paused. Ethan met her eyes. "Not canceled. Not yet. I do not make decisions without documents." It was not warm, but it was honest. Claire could work with honest. "Your company is trying to buy my neighborhood," she said. "People there think you are waiting for families to get tired enough to sell." His jaw tightened slightly. Sometimes they are right to think that. The admission surprised her. He looked out the window toward the towers downtown, where morning sunlight flashed across glass walls. "My company has made profitable decisions. Not always proud ones." Claire studied him, trying to decide whether that was guilt or strategy. "Then why help me?" Ethan looked back at the brass key resting near her coffee cup. "Because last night someone used paperwork to turn you into a trespasser at your own front door. I know what that looks like." Before she could ask what he meant, Marissa called back. Ethan put the phone on speaker. Her voice came through crisp and fast. "The seller listed for the Bennett property is Ryan Whitmore, acting under claimed equitable interest. There is no recorded deed transfer to him. There is, however, a trust notation from 8 years ago. We do not have the trust documents." Claire's fingers tightened around her mug. "So he cannot sell it?" "Not legally if the trust blocks it," Marissa said. "But if he convinced a buyer to accept an affidavit and push a quick closing, he could create a very expensive mess before anyone untangles it." Ethan's eyes hardened. "Who approved that risk on our side?" A pause. "A subsidiary broker. The offer is scheduled for preliminary signing tomorrow afternoon." Tomorrow. Claire felt the word tilt the room. Ethan ended the call and turned the folder toward her. "You need representation. I can provide it." Claire almost said yes because desperation was loud. But her mother's voice rose louder. "Do not trade one locked door for another." "What do you want?" she asked. Ethan leaned back. For the first time, a faint hint of respect touched his expression. "You assume there is a price. There is always a price in buildings like yours." He did not deny it. Instead, he pulled a napkin from the dispenser and clicked a pen. "Then we write one down." Claire stared. "On a napkin? Clearer than most contracts I have seen." He wrote 3 lines, then slid it to her. "Caldwell Holdings will not buy, pressure, or negotiate for Claire Bennett's home without her written consent. Caldwell Holdings' legal team will review all documents related to the Bennett property. Claire Bennett will attend tonight's Maple Ridge community meeting and state only what she knows to be true." Claire read it twice. "That protects you too," she said. "Yes. Because you want me in that room so the neighbors do not eat you alive." "Also yes." She almost smiled despite everything. At least he did not decorate self-interest and call it charity. She picked up the pen and added her own line beneath his. "Ethan Caldwell will not use my grief as public relations." Ethan read it, and something softened in his face. "Fair." They both signed. His signature was sharp and controlled. Hers was uneven but real. The waitress returned with toast, and Claire realized her hands were shaking. Ethan noticed this time. He pushed the plate gently closer to her. "Eat first," he said. "Then we find out what M. R. B. 214 means." Claire froze. I never told you about the numbers. Ethan nodded toward the key. You were rubbing them with your thumb in the lobby, like they were the only thing keeping you standing. Claire looked down at the brass key, suddenly embarrassed, suddenly seen. Outside, the city kept moving, cars splashing through puddles, people hurrying toward lives that had not collapsed overnight. Inside the diner, a billionaire and a florist sat over a napkin contract, a cold piece of toast, and a mystery hidden in 3 letters and 3 numbers. For the first time since Ryan closed the door, Claire did not feel locked out. She felt like someone had finally turned around and stood beside her. By late afternoon, Ryan Whitmore had already started rewriting the story before Claire had a chance to tell the truth. The first post appeared in the Maple Ridge neighborhood group just after 3 o'clock. Claire Bennett has partnered with Caldwell Holdings. Do not be fooled by tears. Some people sell out and then play victim. By 4, there were comments from people who had known Claire since she was 10 years old, people who bought bouquets from her mother on Mother's Day, people who used to wave at her from porches in July. Some defended her. Some asked questions. Some believed Ryan because lies often arrive dressed as concern. Claire read the post from the back seat of Ethan's black SUV, her thumb hovering over the screen, her throat too tight for words. Ethan sat beside her, reviewing documents on a tablet while the city rolled past in streaks of brick storefronts and wet pavement. He glanced over once. Do not answer him online. So I just let him call me a sellout? No, Ethan said. You answer him where it matters. The Maple Ridge community meeting was held in the basement of St. Luke's Church, with folding chairs, paper cups of coffee, and a long table at the front where city planners had taped maps to the wall. Claire had been in that basement for bake sales, charity drives, and her mother's memorial luncheon. Tonight it felt like a courtroom without a judge. Conversations quieted the moment she walked in with Ethan Caldwell at her side. The silence was not empty. It had weight. Mrs. Ellison looked away. Mr. Parker from the corner store folded his arms. Someone whispered, "That is him." Someone else whispered, "Why is she with him?" Claire wanted to explain everything at once, but Ethan's voice came low beside her. "Only what you know to be true." She looked at him, and for one strange second, the billionaire did not look powerful. He looked steady. That helped. Ryan was already near the front, polished and confident, wearing the navy blazer Claire had once helped him pick for a job interview. He smiled when he saw her, the same public smile he had given the officers. "Claire," he said loudly enough for people to hear. "I am glad you came. Maybe now everyone can understand what has really been going on." Her stomach turned, but she kept walking. A city representative began with zoning terms and projected maps, but the room was too tense to care about parking ratios and setbacks. Finally, Ryan stood. "Before anyone blames Caldwell Holdings, I think the neighborhood deserves honesty," he said. "Claire and I were building a life together in that house. I paid repairs. I handled bills. Then she left, came back with Mr. Caldwell, and now suddenly she claims I have no rights at all." Murmurs moved through the room. Claire felt everyone like a small stone. Ryan turned toward her, gentle voice, cruel eyes. "I know you are grieving, but grief does not excuse using a billionaire to erase someone who stood by you." The room shifted. Doubt spread fast. Claire rose before fear could pin her down. Her knees felt weak, but her voice came out clear enough. "I did not leave that house. I went to Arizona to honor my mother's final wish. When I came home, the lock had been changed." A few faces softened. Ryan opened his mouth, but Claire kept going. "I did not ask Mr. Caldwell to buy my home. I asked him to stop his company from buying it from someone who does not own it." That landed. Even Ethan looked at her with quiet approval. Ryan laughed once. "And where is your proof?" Claire reached into her coat pocket and pulled out the brass key. The room seemed to lean toward it. "I have the deed record showing my mother placed the home in a family trust. I do not have the full documents yet, but I will." Ryan's smile thinned. "A key is not a legal document." "No," Claire said. "But neither is your ego." A few people gasped. Someone in the back muttered, "Good for her." Ryan's face flushed, but Ethan stood before he could recover. He buttoned his suit jacket, calm as a closing door. "Caldwell Holdings has paused all activity involving the Bennett property pending legal review. If Mr. Whitmore's claim is valid, documents will prove it. If it is not, my company will not participate in taking a home from its rightful owner. The room went still. It was the choice Claire had not expected him to make in public. He was risking the deal. His deal. Ryan knew it too. His eyes flicked from Ethan to Claire, and for the first time, Claire saw worry crack through his performance. After the meeting, people did not rush to her, but they no longer looked away. Mrs. Ellison touched Claire's arm and whispered, "Your mother always said that house was meant to stay with you." Outside, under the church awning, Ethan loosened his tie and exhaled like a man who had just stepped off a ledge. Claire looked at him. "You did not have to do that." "Yes," he said, watching Ryan hurry across the parking lot with his phone pressed to his ear. "I did." Then his phone buzzed. He read the message and his expression sharpened. "Marissa found something. Your mother used to rent a safe deposit box at Meridian Riverbank." Claire's hand closed around the brass key. Ethan looked at the tiny scratched numbers catching the light. "Branch location has an archive vault. Box 214. Meridian Riverbank closed at 5, but Ethan Caldwell made one phone call from the church parking lot, and by 5:40, a branch manager in a gray suit was unlocking a side entrance with the tense politeness of someone who did not usually stay late for strangers. Claire followed Ethan through the quiet marble lobby, the brass key warm in her palm from being held too tightly. Outside, evening traffic hissed along the wet street. Inside, everything smelled like polished wood, paper, and money sleeping behind walls. The manager, Mr. Alden, checked Claire's identification, her mother's death certificate, and the old rental record Marissa had sent over. He studied the key under a desk lamp, then looked at Claire more gently. "Your mother kept this box active for a long time," he said. "Paid 10 years in advance." Claire swallowed. She was a florist. She saved coupons in a coffee can. Why would she pay for a safe deposit box? Mr. Alden did not answer. Some answers had to be opened. He led them downstairs to the archive vault, where the air turned cooler and every sound became smaller. Claire could hear her own breathing. She could hear Ethan's footsteps behind her, steady but careful, as if he understood this was not his moment to own. They stopped in front of a wall of small metal doors. Mr. Alden found number 214. Claire raised the brass key. For almost a day that key had felt useless, a symbol of everything Ryan had stolen. Now it slid into the lock like it had been waiting for her. One turn. A soft click. No resistance. Claire closed her eyes for half a second. Then Mr. Alden pulled out the long metal box and placed it on a private table. "Take your time," he said, stepping away. Claire lifted the lid. The first thing she saw was a white envelope with her name written in her mother's handwriting. Not formal. Not pretty. Familiar. Claire's knees weakened, and Ethan quietly pulled out a chair without touching her. She sat. Her fingers trembled as she opened the letter. "My sweet Claire, if you are reading this, it means I am not there to explain things the way I should have. I know you think I kept secrets because I did not trust you. The truth is, I kept them because I did not trust everyone around you." Claire pressed a hand to her mouth. Ethan looked away, giving her privacy in the only way he could inside a room with no windows. She kept reading. "This house is yours. It was always meant to be yours. 8 years ago, I placed it in the Bennett family trust so no boyfriend, creditor, smooth talker, or frightened mistake could take it from you. The original papers are in this box. Do not argue at the front door. Open the right box." Claire laughed once through tears she refused to let fall fully. Her mother. Even gone, still practical. Still 2 steps ahead. Beneath the letter was a folder labeled Bennett Family Trust. Ethan leaned forward only when Claire nodded. Together, they unfolded the documents. Marissa's name appeared on Ethan's phone a moment later, and Claire sent photos through shaking hands. While they waited, Claire found another envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of emails between Ryan and a local broker, discussing a quick sale, occupancy claims, and how grief might make Claire less likely to push back before closing. Claire went cold. There was also a photograph, time-stamped from the small camera, her mother had installed above the kitchen shelf after a string of package thefts on the block. Ryan stood at the desk in the living room, holding papers from the bottom drawer Claire had never opened. Not a dramatic scene. No shouting. Just proof. Quiet, plain, devastating. Ethan's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his expression changed from focus to absolute. "Say that again," he said. Marissa's voice came through, clear and controlled. "The trust is valid. Margaret Bennett was grantor and trustee. Upon death, Claire Bennett is sole beneficiary and successor trustee. Ryan Whitmore has no ownership interest in the property. His agreement does not override the trust." Claire stared at the metal box, at the letter, at her mother's careful handwriting. For the first time since the porch air reached the deepest part of her lungs. Ethan ended the call and looked at her. Not with pity, not with triumph, but with respect. "Your mother protected you." Claire touched the letter. "She knew I would try to be nice until it cost me everything." Ethan's voice lowered. "Being kind is not the same as being unprotected." Claire looked up at him then. Something passed between them, quiet and unexpected. Not romance yet. Not rescue. Recognition. He had power. She had proof. And for once proof was stronger. As they left the vault, Claire placed the brass key back in her pocket, but it no longer felt like a memory. It felt like a promise with teeth. In the lobby, Ethan's phone buzzed again. He read the message and went still. Ryan moved the preliminary signing to tomorrow morning. Claire held her mother's folder tighter. "Then we go tomorrow morning." Ethan's eyes met hers. "He will expect you to plead." Claire stepped into the cool evening air, the city lights beginning to glow around them. "Good," she said. "Then he will be too distracted to notice I came prepared." Ryan Whitmore chose the conference room because he believed glass walls made him look powerful. The room sat on the 12th floor of a boutique law office downtown, with a view of the river, a polished walnut table, and a silver tray of untouched bottled water. By 9:10 in the morning, he was already there, laughing softly with a broker in a charcoal suit, his pen placed neatly beside the paperwork as if the house on Maple Ridge Lane had been waiting all its life for his signature. Claire watched from the hallway for one quiet second before entering. She wore the same black dress from her mother's service, a borrowed coat from Denise at the diner, and her hair pulled back so tightly it made her face look calmer than she felt. In her arms was the Bennett family trust folder. In her pocket was the brass key. Ethan stood beside her, not in front of her. That mattered more than she wanted to admit. Ryan looked up and smiled like he had expected this exact scene. "Claire," he said, spreading his hands with practiced patience. "I was hoping you would come before making this uglier." The broker shifted uncomfortably when Ethan stepped in behind her. Ryan's smile faltered for less than a second, then returned. "Mr. Caldwell, I thought your company understood urgency." Ethan did not sit. "We understand liability." The word changed the air. Ryan gave a small laugh. "This is a simple transfer. I have maintained the property, lived there, invested money, and Claire signed an agreement acknowledging shared interest." He tapped the document in front of him. "Everyone is wasting time." Claire looked at the paper. Her signature sat near the bottom, small and trusting. It hurt to see how easily a moment of exhaustion could be dressed up as consent. But this time she did not reach for the old fear. She opened her folder instead. "Before anyone signs," she said, "I want the buyer to hear the full truth." Ryan leaned back. "The full truth is that you cannot accept that adults make practical decisions." Claire looked at him, then really looked. Not at the man she had loved. Not at the man who had brought soup when her mother was sick. At the man who had mistaken her kindness for weakness. "You changed my locks while I was burying my mother," she said. The broker's eyes flicked toward Ryan. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Security concerns. You opened my mail. Household management. You put my belongings at risk and listed a property that was never yours to sell." His expression hardened. "Enough." Ethan's legal counsel, Marissa Cole, entered at that exact moment, carrying a slim leather binder. She was calm, direct, and did not waste a single movement. "Actually," she said, placing the binder on the table, "we are just getting started." Ryan stared at her. "Who are you?" "Counsel for Caldwell Holdings, presently reviewing potential fraud exposure connected to this attempted transaction." The broker quietly put down his pen. Marissa opened the binder. The Bennett property was transferred into the Bennett Family Trust 8 years ago. Margaret Rose Bennett was trustee. Upon her death, Claire Bennett became sole beneficiary and successor trustee. Mr. Whitmore has no deeded ownership, no trustee authority, and no legal right to transfer the property. Ryan's face drained, but he recovered quickly. That trust could be outdated. Claire placed her mother's original letter on the table. It is not. Marissa added the certified trust documents beside it, confirmed by Meridian Riverbank records and county filing references. Ryan looked at Ethan. Your company already agreed to buy through the subsidiary. Are you really going to blow up your own deal over her sob story? The words should have cut. They did not. Claire had proof now, and proof gave her spine. Ethan finally sat slowly across from Ryan. No, he said. I am going to let you sign. Claire turned to him, stunned. Ryan blinked. What? Ethan slid the purchase acknowledgement forward, his expression unreadable. If you are confident you have authority, sign the seller certification. Under penalty of perjury. In front of counsel. For the first time, Ryan did not move. The room became so quiet Claire could hear the faint hum of the lights. Ethan's trap was not loud. Did not need to be. Ryan stared at the pen as if it had changed shape. This is harassment. Marissa closed the binder. It is a choice. Claire reached into her pocket and set the brass key on the table between them. The tiny scratched letters caught the morning sun. R. B. 214. Ryan recognized it. She saw the flicker in his eyes. He had seen that key before. Maybe in her mother's hand. Maybe in the kitchen drawer. Maybe on the nightstand when he thought no one was watching. Claire's voice came soft, but every person in the room heard it. You knew there was something you could not find. Ryan stood abruptly, then forced himself still. Claire, listen to me. We can settle this privately. No, she said. You had a private chance when I was standing in the rain. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then looked to Marissa. She nodded. The bank had confirmed the archive access log. Ryan had visited Meridian Riverbank 3 weeks earlier asking about Margaret Bennett's box and had been denied. The last piece slid into place without a shout, without a threat, without a hand raised. Just paperwork. Just timestamps. Just the quiet patience of a mother who had protected her daughter from beyond the grave. Ryan looked around the room and found no audience left to charm. The broker gathered his documents. Marissa informed him that all materials would be forwarded to the appropriate civil authorities. Ryan reached for the papers, then stopped when Ethan's gaze lifted. Not angry. Final. Claire picked up the brass key and held it once before placing it back in her pocket. I came here thinking I had to beg for my home, she said. But my mother already made sure I would never have to. Ryan said nothing. He simply watched as Claire turned and walked out of the glass conference room, leaving behind the unsigned contract, the exposed lie, and the man who had changed a lock without understanding he had never held the real key. Claire did not feel victorious when she stepped out of the law office. Victory, she realized, was louder in movies. In real life, it could feel like shaky knees, cold hands, and the strange emptiness that comes after surviving something you should never have had to fight. The city moved around her as if nothing had happened. Buses sighed at the curb. Office workers hurried past with paper cups of coffee. Somewhere across town, flowers were being delivered, mail was being sorted, and people were unlocking front doors without thinking twice about the miracle of being allowed inside. Ethan walked beside her in silence until they reached the sidewalk. Marissa will file the injunction request within the hour, he said. Ryan will receive notice to vacate. Your attorney can also pursue damages for the lock change, the attempted sale, and the false claims. Claire nodded, but her eyes stayed on the brass key in her palm. It had opened a box. It had opened the truth. But it still would not open her front door. Ethan seemed to understand the thought before she said it. Do you want to go home? The word hit softly. Home. Not property. Not asset. Not parcel number. Home. Claire looked at him. I want to see what he did to it. Ethan did not correct her. He did not say she should wait. He simply called the locksmith Caldwell Holdings used for commercial properties, and told him this was a personal job, not a corporate one. By noon, Claire stood again on Maple Ridge Lane, this time in daylight. The little white house looked smaller than it had in the rain, but no less wounded. Mrs. Ellison was on her porch pretending to water a fern that had clearly already been watered. Mr. Parker from the corner store stood by his truck, watching with quiet concern. Ryan was not there. The notice from Marissa had arrived before Claire did, and perhaps for the first time in his life, Ryan had decided silence was safer than performance. The locksmith removed the new silver lock while Claire stood with her arms folded, holding herself together. When the door finally opened, the first thing she noticed was the smell. Not bad, just wrong. Ryan's cologne lingered over the softer scent of lemon cleaner and old wood. Her mother's blue quilt had been moved. The kitchen drawers were half open. A vase from the mantel sat on the floor, empty. And in the living room, several framed photographs had been turned face down. Claire walked to the one of her mother beneath the white rose trellis and lifted it carefully. Margaret Bennet smiled up at her in a sun hat, holding pruning shears like a queen with a scepter. Claire's mouth trembled. "You really did know," she whispered. Ethan stayed near the doorway, giving her space. That was becoming his way of being kind. Not rushing in. Not taking over. Letting her decide where he belonged. Claire moved through the room slowly, returning small things to their places. A mug to the shelf. A quilt to the chair. A photograph to the mantel. Each gesture felt like reclaiming 1 inch of air. Then she reached the back door and stopped. The garden. The white rosebush beneath the kitchen window had been cut back carelessly, several stems broken, petals scattered in the wet dirt like little pieces of paper. It was not violence. It was pettiness. Somehow that made it ache more. Claire knelt beside the plant, touching one bent branch. "She planted this the year we moved in," she said. She said white roses were stubborn. They looked delicate, but they survived almost anything. Ethan stepped out onto the back porch. His suit shoes stopped at the edge of the mud. "Then we do not replace it," he said. "We help it recover." Claire looked back at him, and despite the exhaustion, something warm flickered in her chest. Not I will fix it for you. Not let me handle it. The locksmith called from the hallway, asking what kind of lock she wanted now. Claire stood, brushed dirt from her hands and walked back inside. On the kitchen counter, she saw the napkin contract from the diner, folded where Ethan had placed it with the trust folder. She picked it up and read the uneven lines again. No buying. No pressure. No grief used as public relations. Ethan watched her quietly. "That napkin is not legally elegant," he said. Claire almost smiled. "It may be the most honest contract I have ever signed." His expression softened. "Then let us honor it." She chose a new lock herself. Not the most expensive one. Not the one Ethan suggested first. A simple solid brass deadbolt that felt warm in her hand. When it was installed, the locksmith handed her 2 new keys. Claire looked at them, then at the old brass key from her mother. One opened the door now. One had opened the truth. She slipped both onto the same ring. Outside, Mrs. Ellison crossed the street with a casserole wrapped in foil, eyes red but chin high. Mr. Parker brought a small bag of coffee from his store. One by one, the neighborhood that had doubted her began returning, not with speeches but with offerings. Quiet apologies. Paper plates. A borrowed rake. A promise to testify if needed. As the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, Claire stood on her porch with Ethan beside her, watching Maple Ridge Lane breathe again. Ryan had tried to make her look homeless in front of everyone. Instead, he had reminded the whole street what home was supposed to mean. 3 months later, the white rosebush bloomed again. Not perfectly. Not the way it had in old photographs. Some branches still leaned crooked, and a few stems carried scars where careless hands had cut too deep, but the flowers opened anyway, bright and stubborn beneath the kitchen window. Claire stood beside them on a Sunday morning, wearing faded jeans, garden gloves, and a sweatshirt with a smear of potting soil across one sleeve. The little white house on Maple Ridge Lane no longer felt like a place she was defending. It felt alive again. The front room had become a small flower studio during the week, with buckets of roses, lilies, and wild greenery lined near the windows. On Saturdays, neighbors came by for bouquets wrapped in brown paper. On Sundays, the dining room changed into something else entirely. A folding table replaced the flower bench. A coffee urn sat beside a tray of muffins. Marissa Cole and 2 volunteer attorneys reviewed housing documents for people who had nowhere else to ask questions. Claire called it the White Rose House, but she never put her name on the sign. The sign only said, "Home should never be taken by confusion." Ryan's case moved through civil court quietly. There were no dramatic confrontations, no last-minute speeches in hallways. Just documents, affidavits, bank records, and consequences. He was ordered to leave the property alone, repay damages, and face legal penalties for the false claims connected to the attempted sale. Claire did not attend every hearing. She did not need to watch him lose in order to heal. The real justice was waking up every morning and turning her own key in her own door. Ethan Caldwell arrived at 9:15, exactly 15 minutes late, carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag from the bakery on 3rd Street. He no longer came in a suit on Sundays. Today, his sleeves were rolled up, his collar open, his expensive watch replaced by a plain leather band Claire suspected he wore because garden soil had no respect for luxury. He stopped at the gate and waited. He always waited. The first time he had done it, Claire had asked why. He had looked at the house, then at her and said, "Because no one enters your home just because they can." That was the moment she had understood him fully. Ethan Caldwell could buy entire city blocks, but the one thing that made him different from Ryan was that he knew ownership and belonging were not the same. Claire opened the gate for him. "You are late." The bakery line was 9 people long, he said. A brutal test of character. She took 1 coffee and tried not to smile. "And did you pass?" "Barely." Inside, the morning was already busy. Mrs. Ellison was arranging chairs. Mr. Parker was fixing a loose hinge on the back cabinet. Denise from the diner had brought a tray of cinnamon rolls and was telling Marissa that every legal document should come with coffee and a warning label. Ethan set the bakery bag down, then followed Claire into the garden. Together, they planted 3 new white rose bushes along the fence, leaving room for them to grow wild if they wanted. For a while they worked without speaking. That had become their language too. Not silence from distance but silence from trust. When they finished, Claire took the old brass key from the chain around her neck. She had stopped using it for doors. Now it hung there as a reminder that some love protected quietly, long before danger arrived. Ethan noticed her holding it. "Do you ever think about putting it away?" he asked. Claire shook her head. "No. It reminds me to check the fine print." He laughed softly. Then she pulled the folded diner napkin from her back pocket. The ink had faded a little, and the creases had softened, but the words were still there. No buying. No pressure. No grief used as public relations. Ethan looked at it, then at her. "You kept it." "Of course I kept it," Claire said. "It was the first contract I signed that made me feel safer instead of smaller." His expression changed then, the controlled calm giving way to something honest and unguarded. "Claire, I spent years thinking the answer to losing a home was to own more buildings than anyone could take from me." He looked at the little house, the crowded dining room, the neighbors laughing through the screen door. "Then you turned one house into something my company never knew how to build." Claire's voice softened. "What is that?" Ethan stepped closer but not too close, always leaving her the choice. "A place people trust." For a moment the world narrowed to sunlight, wet soil, white roses, and the man who had never tried to rescue her by taking control. Claire reached for his hand first. His fingers closed around hers gently, as if trust was something sacred enough to hold carefully. There was no grand proposal, no diamond held up like a prize, no promise that money would make life easy. There was only Ethan standing in her mother's garden, asking the question that mattered most. "May I keep showing up?" Claire looked toward the house. Mrs. Ellison was waving them in. Denise was pretending not to watch. Marissa was smiling into her coffee. The front door stood open, brass deadbolt shining in the morning light. Claire thought of the night in the rain, the locked door, the suitcase, the feeling of being erased. Then she looked at the roses blooming anyway. "Yes," she said. "But you still have to wait at the gate." Ethan smiled, and this time it reached every part of him. "Always." Claire slipped the old brass key back beneath her sweatshirt and walked with him toward the open door. The house was hers. The choice was hers. And love, real love, did not arrive with a new lock. It arrived with patience, proof, respect, and someone willing to stand beside you while you opened the door yourself.